So good afternoon, everyone. It's 5 o'clock, and we can start the next session, which is pre-event number 12. So Youth Guide to Smart Cities, the Environment, and the Internet. Just few slides about housekeeping here at in the session. So the moderator is going to be Elliot Mann. Session rules. So please enter with your full name. If you want to ask a question, raise your hand using the Zoom function. You will be unmuted when the floor is given to you. When speaking, please switch on the video, state your name and affiliation. And don't forget that the chat will not be stored or published. Do not share the links to the Zoom meetings, not even with your colleagues or your friends. I think we're ready to start, and I leave the floor to Elliot, please.
Thank you. And I think I will immediately hand it to Alexandra to give us a bit of an introduction.
Thank you, Elliot. Thank you also to co-organizers. As you all know, this session is organized by Youth Coalition on the Internet Governance. So I will briefly present Youth Coalition, and then I'll give the word to Elliot to speak about our session and our topic, which is Youth Guide to Smart Cities, Environment, and the Internet.
Sure.
Just
Yes,
quickly to share the screen.
I've got my slides. All right. Let me know if you can't see that good. Yes, so everyone, welcome to our session. Today we're going to be discussing smart cities, the environment, and the internet, which are three topics which might initially appear very separate. But what we're going to try and explore is how they sort of link together and why it's important, particularly for young people as well. So what I'm going to talk about, at least initially here, is I'm going to talk about, what are smart cities? What does it mean in relation to environmental sustainability? How do these react? We'll look at one case study, which is Barcelona, some of the issues raised out of the case study and more generally. And then also we're going to have some discussion questions. The way this session overall is going to be structured is a bit informal. I'm going to speak a bit here at the start. I'm by no means a subject matter expert, but what I really want to do is paint a picture for everyone, so you have an idea of what we're going to talk about later. Because the bulk of the session really is going to be an outline of, we're going to have some policy discussion questions that we're going to discuss. If we get enough people, we'll break out into breakout rooms, but at this point, I don't think we'll necessarily need to. And what we really want to do is spend the bulk of the session sort of going over these discussion questions, exploring the intersection between smart cities, the environment, and the internet, and then come back later and have, share what our thoughts are and what some learnings are. One of the things I really always enjoy about EuroDIG, but then these sorts of meetings more generally, is the ability of us to get different perspectives from all over Europe, all around the world, about these issues, and to hear about the different solutions. So what are smart cities? At its core, there's really a couple of things. And feel free at all times to leave something in the chat as well if you have some thoughts at this stage. Smart cities are firstly about the use of devices to collect data about the city. So this can be temperature, weather, traffic, all sorts of different things. And then secondly, it's about the integrated network between humans, technology, institutions, energy, and the environment. So if you think of a city as an organism, a smart city is something where we can look and see how the organism works. We can monitor it, and there's a network. All the different things are networked. So it's really about knowledge. It's really about information, and it's really about connectedness and knowing exactly what is happening at every point in time. Now, environmental sustainability, something very different, is about a focus on long-term environment survival. In many ways, often we talk about this in terms of climate change, but long-term can mean different things. In climate change, it means decades or even centuries. But even more sustainability, you want your city to last for the next 5 years, the next 10 years, as well as the next 100. So sustainability really means that something you can create which has long-term survival into the future. And then how do these interact? Well, a lot of the time people think that the rise of technology has come at the cost of the environment. And I think, in the broader world, we've seen that this is true in terms of things like climate change coming out of the last industrial revolution. But in smart cities, we know that technology is bad for the environment. It's developed in that way. But is that necessarily true with smart cities, where we integrate technology greater and greater into our cities? Is that coming at the cost of the environment? If you're putting more technology into these concrete slabs, I think you're ignoring the fact that you're still using concrete slabs all over your city. So initially, the way that smart cities and the environment interact is that with smart cities, you might be monitoring something that is inherently bad for the environment in the first place. So, the good example is monitoring vehicles. So electric vehicles in the long term are probably better for the environment, but what a lot of people discount is that electric vehicles are still made out of materials which, use a lot of greenhouse gases in their production. So with smart cities, again, you really have to take a step back and think about how the technology comes, at a cost. So Barcelona is an interesting case study. In Barcelona, a few years ago, they really focused on smart cities and integration. So they called it their City OS strategy, very technologically focused. They redesigned their bus network based on technology demands and what they were seeing in the environment, smart traffic lights, focus on livability. And again, all of this was really focused on livability, quality of life, improving things very generically in the city. Ultimately, they found that it did have a positive impact on the environment because congestion was reduced, with how they redesigned the bus network, more people were using public transport, which I think is true. But again, the point I'd stress, and I'll talk about it more in a second, is that, well, at a base level, are you still inherently monitoring something that is bad for the environment and that is not sustainable? So while Barcelona, again, the focus was on livability and how technology could be used to improve your life, if we were to juxtapose that against environmental sustainability, we have to ask, is it sustainable? And the answer is a bit more vexed. I mean, smart cities have, potentially, on one view, only been around for a couple of decades. Is that really the sort of time frame where we can look at things and say, is it sustainable? So some of the issues that are coming up against some of the issues that we come up with smart cities and the environment are things like surveillance, which I haven't really talked about yet, but is certainly an issue. I mean, if we're tracking everything in our cities, is that something, that respects our privacy? This is where we get into the positive and negative uses of technology. Do centrally planned cities ignore the natural organic growth of cities? Cities have organically evolved. I've seen some really interesting studies on how cities do evolve as organisms. If we put sensors all over our city and design them based off that point, does that ignore what is potentially their natural organic growth? Do smart cities ignore the inability of the common citizen to utilize these technologies? In many ways, if everything is tracked for you, well, then is that something that you can leverage? I know in New York City, for example, a lot of their transit data is exposed through common APIs, which is fantastic there, but that's not readily emulated across the rest of the world. And same with accessibility. And this is something that comes up very often when we're discussing technology issues, but doubly so when we're discussing smart cities and places where people actually live. Are the technologies, are these that enable a smart city, is it truly accessible to everybody, all the citizens? And often the answer is not. When you're developing technologies, it can be very, very difficult to cater to that final subset of users who really do need assistance. And they can be forgotten. But that cannot be the case in a city where absolutely everyone needs services and everything accessible to them. So some of the discussion questions that we're going to be focusing on, I do think we might have enough people to split out into groups, is how are smart cities envisioned in your economy? Europe is a very varied place. The world is a very, very varied place, and smart cities represent themselves differently in different places. What involvement do young people have in smart city governance in your economy? Again, and same with the next question, environmental governance. Again, this can represent itself differently in different places. I know in Australia, where I'm from, and certainly in a lot of Western countries, it can be very difficult for young people to feel like they probably have a voice and have a say in, whether it be local city governments and environmental governance. Again, the fourth question there around, what is the role of young people in local governance? Well, the role of young people in local governance is probably very, very important, but is it necessarily something that's respected? Maybe not. And the final question there around what steps can governments and other stakeholders take to ensure that cities best reflect those who live within them? I think this is really the practical question that we want to get at. So what we're going to do now is I think we might break out and discuss some of these questions. It's not necessarily required that everybody gets to and discusses all of these questions. If you just get stuck on the first one and have a really good conversation about it, then that's fine. But otherwise, the focus is really just on the discussion and figuring out what your thoughts are. So I will shortly put you all into breakout rooms. So just give me a sec.
Okay, while Elliot is configuring the breakout rooms, I'll be sharing the links to join the YCIG mailing list and our Facebook group as well.
Thanks. All right, I've just opened up the breakout room. So if you jump in there, and then I think I should be able to, I'll also still share the questions in the chat as well, so everyone can see. Hi, everyone. I think we're now all coming back from our breakout rooms. Does anyone want to share some of what they discussed?
My group was just with me and Noha, 2 persons, so I will just go through what we have discussed. So for the first question, I've just mentioned that Korea is trying to have more technology, AI, and 5G integrated throughout the economy, and trying to have smart government by bringing more business and job opportunity, fostering the on-tech industry, supporting online activities and remote work. And Noah has also mentioned that Egypt is also trying to upgrade their infrastructure by encouraging e-services and financing, and trying to advocate it's okay to trust the online transaction and cashless services. And the second one was about participate in smart city and environment. So in Korea, there are a lot of projects like the youth trying to filling a constitutional appeal against the government and trying to raise the public awareness about like climate change. And Noah has shared that in Egypt, they are trying to have more sustainable fashion by using less plastic bag and having more advocate about those sustainable fashion. And the third one about the role of youth in local governance. So for this one, we think that youth are having a unique role in smart city because they have a fresh insight and they have good knowledge about high technology. So I think they should be the one who are trying to advocate and trying to even educate older generation by helping them to have a effective transformation, I would say, into a smart city. And also in this kind of sense, the government should also trying to see and trying to acknowledge those youth initiatives because without their effort, it would be still very hard for the country to be transformed into a smart city. So yeah, those were our two persons discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, J1. That's very insightful. I really like the focus on really the role that young people can have in agitating for change, as well as, you know, just participating in you know, sort of the discussions. I think really being catalysts for change is really important as well. Anyone else want to share briefly what they talked about, even if it was only two people?
Hi, I had the opportunity to have a discussion with Titi. So she is a professional and has experience in internet governance as well, and she has been a MAG member herself. So it was quite a useful discussion that we had on the questions that are laid down. So on the first question of how are smart cities envisioned in your economy, and since Titi come from Roma, Italy, so she explained how it's not at present, maybe it must not have been envisioned as that important an asset, and there are several reasons to it, like fundings for many projects stopped, and there are several other environmental factors to be considered as well, like energy efficiency, improvement in development work, and intelligent cities designing. So she mentioned that Rome is also experiencing pollution problems, and there are some. So this leads to some working action items on which youth can work and improve, and then it can be truly envisioned as a smart economy. Then we also discussed about the involvement of young people in smart city governance, and Titi explained that how young people have brilliant ideas, and it is very important to steer growth. She gave an example of how in the ICT sector, youth committee of Internet Governance Forum is formed in Italy, and it is also advocating for the voices of youth as well as smart internet governance. And similarly, it can be laid down for other development sectors as well. And then we talked about what involvement young people can have in environmental governance in economies. And in this section, I really like the point of Titi where she mentioned that it's very important to have that integration of young minds and the old generation, because we discussed how in policy making bodies, it's old school that they require certain experience and certain age bracket because they expect some experience to have, but there needs to be some integration for to steer growth in that aspect as well. Maybe they can launch some campaigns or some short-term fellowships for the young minds, for the young people, in which they can get involved and then contribute to the decision-making process. So in this way, not only the young minds learn about how policy governance can be made, but also the old generation gets an idea of what the young people are thinking about. So that was a very important point. And so basically this point covered the role of young people in local governance as well. So I also discussed about how some young people are contributing to the cause of local governance in Asia Pacific region. And Titi also resonated the same about how it should be done in European cities as well, including Italy. Then we were just discussing about what steps can governments and other stakeholders take to ensure that cities best reflect those who live within them. In this, we slightly discussed upon the point that private organizations do give young people a lot more chance to explore and to be involved with them. But there's a lot of scope for government sector as well to get involved with the young minds. And by the time we could gather over some more points or brainstorm on the more points, our time ended for the room. But it was really a very good discussion, and I'm really glad that we could get the window to discuss for this. Thank you.
No, that's fantastic. Thanks, Atif. Certainly, I think one point that is important to stress is that all of this is a partnership. It should never be, one person working on solving a massive problem. In the same way that it's not just young people who have a responsibility here, it is a partnership with government, with other generations, with other demographics. So I really liked that point that arose out of your discussion. That's fantastic. Is there anyone else who'd like to share? I think I can just make a general observation. Feel free also to put anything in chat if you want. A more general observation for me, I think the focus on partnerships and agitating for change is really important. I think one of the key elements that I think we've covered here is that smart cities aren't necessarily something that you should just dive into immediately and work on without considering the sort of other impacts out there. So one of the things I really do like arising out of this discussion is the idea that you need to have more thought, have a bit more forethinking about it. Vlad, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, with regard to some input from our team. Sorry, I will try to start my camera, but we had actually some connections, so the discussion was quite brief. So we were from Romania, and we tried to compare aspects of governance, smart governance is implemented in our countries. Well, on the one hand, we know that in Serbia there's some matters of citizens. Some mention from China as told us. In we see the initiatives with regard to transportation, doing the transport more efficient. Actually, the samples on the environment. So that's trying to change carbon or city to better and can react in the of cities, and as for the initiatives of the young people is that really attaining and we are trying right now to implement strategies in Romania. Strategies on we better have with the local administration in order to do some change in this session. Thank you.
No, for sure. I think that's very interesting.
Also, some more input around there.
Keep going. No, all good. No, I think that's really important as well. I mean, I remember I was in Romania a couple of weeks ago, and one of the things that was highlighted there was how the integration of smart cities was very focused on catering to the local environment every time, which I felt was a really interesting and fantastic approach. And I really liked your points around highlighting the role of young people as well. I think it is very important to make sure that everyone is engaged and involved. Anyone else want to chip in? If not, I can probably start wrapping up. Alexandra, do you want to present the slides that you were going to present earlier before I stole the presentation away from you? And then once you're done that, I'll wrap up with everyone.
Yes, sure, Elliot. Okay. Are you able to see the slides?
Yep, I can see them.
Great.
Yes,
great.
perfect.
Yeah, as I mentioned, this session is organized by EU Coalition on Internet Governance. So I'm going just to briefly explain what EU Coalition on Internet Governance is and to share with you the ways how you can participate in our activities. As I said, EU Coalition on Internet Governance is an official recognized dynamic coalition at the IGF. So the dynamic coalition are not organizations, they are not initiatives, but they are a way in which like different stakeholders can collaborate on different issues that doesn't necessarily have to be one issue. They can be they can cover like a range of issues, but they focus on these issues between two IGF meetings. So the main issue which is focus of Youth Coalition Internet Governance is to advocate for the voice of children, young people, and young professionals in the field. Coalition itself was established in 2010, and so far we conducted many different activities. We also published many different papers, which you can also find on our website. Currently, like the steering committee of Youth Coalition Internet Governance is made from 5 representatives from 5 different UN regions. These are like current representatives. I think that everyone except Eileen is here today. And these are some of our activities. We collaborate a lot with our communities. We published a lot of questionnaires. Community participates in editing our charters, code of conduct. We also try to engage community when submitting different session proposals for different IGF events, for different papers. The same things we did like with last and this year IGFs. We also participate with national and youth IGF initiatives around the world. One of the main project is also like mentorship for IGF Youth Ambassadors Program. And there's also IGF Plus survey. We participated in global stakeholders for dialogue. We had a session at EuroDIG last year, as well as this one. And we also collaborate with ISOC YCIG in creating open course for youth like IGF. Yeah, and this year one of the big projects also will be like co-organization of Youth IGF Summit with ISOC YCIG and Youth IGF Poland. And these are there's our websites and mailing list. How you can actually join us and participate in our activities. Like these are very open and very friendly spaces. Like even if we don't organize something, there's many other young people who share their initiatives and their projects, and they're very, very open to include you and to work with you in organizing and improving position of youth in the field. I'm going to share also this in the chat because I guess you cannot click. And that's basically it. Thank you very much.
No, thank you for sharing. All right, so let me put up this slide that I just very quickly made. So here are some outcomes that I've come up with coming out of this session, based on our discussions and what we talked about earlier. I think certainly the key point here, something that's really arisen, is the importance of collaboration and partnerships. You know, one of the frequent accusations leveled against young people when agitating for change is that they're not willing to play by the ball game and go through the usual channels, which is sometimes because those usual channels are a bit silly. But a lot of the time there is a need, at least initially, to focus on collaboration and partnerships. And this is, again, where integration with local environments plays a role in it as well. The ability for young people to bring change and to create things does differ depending on where you are. And in that same way, you know, you have to advocate for change. You can't be a passive participant in change. That's just you being carried along by it. If you want actually things to change, unfortunately, you're going to have to do things. And this is where, you know, collaboration and partnerships means that you don't have to do change yourself. And particularly when we're talking about the environment, and especially when we're talking about smart cities, this advocating for change and being active and not just letting things wash over you, I think that's something that we've all highlighted as being quite important. And again, this focus on sustainable change, you know, from the foundation levels, you know, it's not about, if we're, again, putting sensors into slabs of concrete, it doesn't get around the fact that we're still using slabs of concrete, which are bad for the environment. And in a, you know, a different but similar way, speedy change is also something that you need to be wary of, where we've discussed here about the dangers of developing too quickly and doing things at too fast a pace, such that, you know, we lose sight of the environmental sustainability and other aspects here that are quite important. So does anyone have any thoughts or brief comments on, you know, the outcomes, you know, well, some of the things we've discussed here? If not, I think, or has it got a message in the chat? Okay. Well, you know, obviously that's a great summary then, because it summarizes what everyone thought. So I think that's a good point for us to wrap up. We'll let you get about your afternoons, evenings, or mornings a bit 10 minutes earlier. I agree with Noran's chat. Feel free to, you know, keep the discussion going on, you know, our channels that we have. Otherwise, this is always an area in which change is always happening. There's always abilities for people to get involved and to agitate for change actively, not passively, actively. So yes, and thank you. So I think that wraps it up. Thank you everyone for coming. Thank you everyone for participating. I think it's been a really interesting session, and hopefully you all enjoyed it. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Elliot. And just to remind you that you can return back to gather.town. So here are the instructions on the screen. So close the Zoom room, then return to the relevant tab and go back to gather.town. And then to navigate to the venue, you can find a minimap icon at the bottom of the screen next to your name, which will also indicate your location. If you need any help, there is the help desk. And I think that's all for today. Thank you again for the great session, and looking forward to seeing you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Stay safe.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Yeah.